So our first keynote speaker is Frank Yiannas. Frank is the Vice President of Food Safety at the world's largest food retailer, Walmart, which serves over 200 million customers around the world. He oversees all food safety of thousands of food suppliers, public health functions, training, and regulatory compliance. Frank's scope of responsibilities include food safety oversight of Walmart stores, neighborhood markets, and Sam's Clubs. Prior to joining Walmart in 2008, Frank was the Director of Safety and Health for the Walt Disney World Company, where he worked for 19 years. In 2001, under his tenure, Walt Disney World received the prestigious Black Pearl Award for Corporate Excellence in Food Safety by the International Association for Food Protection. In 2008, Frank was given the Collaboration Award by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. He's the 2007 recipient of the NSF International Lifetime Achievement Award for Leadership in Food Safety. Frank is also a past president of the International Association for Food Protection and a current board member of the Global Food Safety Initiative. He is also an adjunct professor in the food safety program at Michigan State University. He's an author of 2 books, Food Safety Culture, Creating a Behavior-Based Food Safety Management System, and Food Safety Equals Behavior, 30 Proven Techniques to Enhance Employee Compliance. Frank is a registered microbiologist with the American Academy of Microbiology. He received his BS in microbiology from the University of Central Florida and his Master of Public Health from the University of South Florida. Please join me in welcoming Frank as our first keynote speaker this morning.
My pleasure, my pleasure. Good morning. It's good to see each and every one of you, and it's a real pleasure being here. I want to thank the McCombs School for inviting us. As you can imagine, working at Walmart, we get invited to present at a lot of places, and we usually have to say no, but it was a real pleasure to say yes because of what Walmart thinks about the school here. I'm a food guy, and I always am surprised when I get invited to speak at a tech conference because what I like to talk about is food. But I'd like to begin. How many of you eat food? Okay, so I have something in common with you. You also heard from my bio, I spent 19 years at the happiest place on earth, and I like to say I went from the happiest place on earth to the busiest place on earth, Walmart, but totally enjoying it, very busy. One more question, then we're going to get into it. How many of you have been to a Disney theme park? Okay, for the few of you that didn't raise your hands, I'd like to see you right after my presentation. If you've been watching the stock price, come on. We're going to start off by telling you we're working with IBM, Walmart, to create a vision for a digital and more transparent food system, which is good for people and the planet. And before we get into the talk, I actually wanted to show a little video. It's about 90 seconds, but it'll paint the picture a little bit clearer, and then we'll go to it in a little bit more detail. You can please show the video.
Customer expects more from their food system. A wide variety of Today's customer expects more from their food system. A wide variety of products and great prices used to be enough, but today, customers want to know more about their food. Where did it come from? Was it sustainably grown? Is it safe? Walmart is partnering with food companies and technology leaders to create a more transparent food system by using blockchain. Blockchain is a way to digitize data that allows us to share information and enhance business transactions in a complex network. This allows the data to be presented in a more secure, trusted, and democratic way. Blockchain enables traceability back to origin, from farm to table. Tracing back to the source will be done in seconds, not weeks. It enables rapid and precise removal of recalled products. This means that unaffected products can remain on store shelves, resulting in less food waste. Blockchain also has the potential to optimize how food gets from farm to table, and that means fresher food for our customers. But the ultimate goal is transparency. By getting rid of the anonymity that exists in the current food system, blockchain will shine a light along every step of the way in the life of our food to help create a safer and better food system.
Pretty cool stuff, isn't it? Envisioning and imagining a more digital and transparent food system and how that would be good. The food system, it's been changing since the beginning of time. We know at the beginning of time we had hunter-gatherer, they would go out and bring food home, probably not too concerned about foodborne illness. Over a period of time, men and women started to domesticate plants and animals. You fast forward to the early 1900s, you had the industrial farming revolution. And the food system continues to change today. The 1980s, the typical grocery store, as you will see here, had about 15,000 food SKUs. 2000s, how many food SKUs do you think the typical grocery store had? 50,000. And where are we going as a world? The notion that you can buy anything you want at any time, anywhere on the planet, because of the blending of digital and physical platforms, e-commerce. And so the food system is becoming increasingly complex. And while a lot of people today like to be critical of today's modern food system, I like to emphasize that the benefits of today's modern food system are fabulous. A year-round supply of fresh, seasonal, nutritious foods for a fraction of your hard-earned dollar. But there are some risks in this new and emerging modern food system. And so I want to talk about those risks because as a retailer with a pretty large operation and footprint, we know we have an important, not only challenge, but responsibility to source safe food. Walmart has millions of customers every week around the world. We're operating in about 28 countries. We have about 12,000 stores. Customers can shop with us in our stores, on our e-commerce platforms, tens of thousands of food suppliers. And so as you can imagine, it's a daunting challenge to make sure that you do that safety. And we're always looking for better ways to do it. But we know that the food system has what we refer to as an Achilles heel. And the Achilles heel is this. I'll give you one case study. I could literally pull out 10 and we could spend all morning talking about examples such as this one. In 2006, there was a spinach outbreak in the United States. I don't know how many of you remember that. And what happened there was shortly after health officials started detecting illnesses in the U.S. related to E. coli 0157, they detected almost 200 cases. You can see there are cases of HUS, that's hemolytic uremic syndrome, a severe form of kidney failure. 3 deaths in 26 states. Health officials came out and said, the only thing that we know for sure is that most of the people that are ill have consumed bagged spinach. We don't know the brand of spinach. We don't know where it came from. But Americans, we would advise you not eat bagged spinach. They went out to retailers, and retailers responsibly said, we get it. And all retailers pulled all spinach. All food service restaurants pulled all spinach. And for a period of time, there was no spinach sold in the United States. Some of you will remember that. I just paused, and I put this picture up here because this is a young lady that I've met, Riley. And I just want you to remember, when it comes to foodborne disease, we often talk about these numbers and statistics, but behind every number, there's a person. It's real people. Pulled all the spinach. It took health officials almost 2 weeks to identify the source. So just imagine, no spinach being sold in the United States for about 2 weeks, because it took them 2 weeks to identify the source. And when it was all said and done, it was one supplier, 1 day's production, a lot of them. That's an Achilles heel, a lack of transparency in the food system and an inability to track and trace. I could have talked about more recent events. You might have heard of papayas in the news a couple of months ago. More recently, spinach and leafy greens. You might hear more in the news today about an outbreak occurring across the nation, and health officials are trying to determine its source. And so this is truly a challenge in the food system. Now, what is blockchain? I'm humbled because I know we have a lot of folks that know a lot about technology and blockchain. We have one of the geniuses at IBM that's been behind the blockchain technology, but I've spent a lot of time learning about it. I would tell you that a year and a half ago, the first time I met with IBM, I was the biggest skeptic. I don't think there was anybody more skeptical than myself. And the IBMers will tell you, when I visited with them in the first few meetings, I literally sat there with my arms crossed thinking, what am I doing here? I've been in this profession for 30 years. Everybody's told me this is the new system that's going to solve transparency in the food system, and it never has. And it's never scaled, right? If somebody could do it, we would have done it by now. And so I was a major skeptic. And I will tell you, over the period of the last year and a half, I've become a believer, almost like a religious conversion. I've said, oh, wow, this is real. And it's because you really have to pause and understand how blockchain works to allow you to imagine how it's different. And so let me, as a layperson, give you my view of why blockchain technology is different. You guys all know the definition. You've heard it. A distributed and decentralized digital ledger. And boring, and people roll their eyes and say, what does that mean? But I want you to look at these 3 images that I put up here. One about a centralized system, 2 distributed and decentralized. And for any of you that know the food system, which image here best represents the food system today? the one to the far right, right? It's a food system, it's a network. We often talk about a food chain, and in fact, I try not to use that term when I speak, because a food chain implies something very simple and linear. A goes to B and B goes to C. In fact, it's a food system, very complicated. Lots of small farmers, lots of distributors, lots of distribution transportation routes. And so it's more of a network. That's why we refer to the food system. But what have we done, and this is why we haven't scaled transparency and traceability in 30 years I've been at it, is because we've created systems that look like this image to the left. Walmart, we have literally a system called the Supply Chain Transparency System. Walmart's the circle at the bottom. We ask suppliers to input data about what they're selling to us and where the ingredients come from. It's this linear siloed system right here. Suppliers put information for us. They never skip to see or reap the rewards of the information that they share with us. And guess what? Those suppliers are also doing business with a gazillion other retailers and food service companies. And if they're doing that, what do they have to do? They have to get in their systems over and over again. A lot of repetition and redundancy. But blockchain solves this network complexity of many to many. And in fact, I've come up with a new definition for the food system. I now say the food system is a distributed and decentralized shared food system. Just pause and think about that. So to me, it's almost as though blockchain and the food system are made for each other. And it's a new enabling technology that allows to solve the complexities in the food system. And the notion that a supplier has to get in here and share information with the big bad retailer, the big bad food service company, and then never benefit from it, as opposed to getting into a network, an ecosystem, share information, and with permissioning, decide who they want to share it with, and not having to get into different systems when they're doing business with other entities. All right, that's it for the technology, because what I really want to talk is about the application, because that's what gets me excited. It's not the technology, that's cool. And I always like to emphasize, because people say, well, it's the fad. It's the flavor of the month. I can tell you with absolute authority that Walmart is not chasing blockchain or the new shiny coin. What we are committed to is continuous improvement in the food system. And so that's why we're working with this new technology and exploring how it can be used. But these are the business challenges that we're hoping to address, leveraging blockchain technology. Foodborne illness. I already showed you the stats with the spinach outbreak, but foodborne illness is still a real risk to real people. By and large, when you eat food in the United States, it's safe and you don't have to worry about it, but it still happens, and one foodborne illness is one too many, and it's certainly very damaging to brands and trust. And so we're trying to address food safety. Traceability, I just gave you an example. Our inability to track and trace foods with precision and accuracy. Food fraud. How many of you like, we're in Austin, I'm sure all of the hands will go up. How many of you like organic food? It's a trendy place, right? Do you know there's more organic food sold in the world that is produced in the world? Some of you are nodding yes, but you still buy it. Okay. We need to open up a school of psychology, not only business here, because people are still buying it, not really sure if it's real or not, but it makes you feel good, right? But issues with food fraud and authenticity. The horse meat scandal is another good one. How many of you remember the horse meat scandal in the UK a couple of years ago? What happened is beef prices were soaring, glut in horse meat, and prices are really low. Unscrupulous actors thought, hey, let's do this. Let's do some substitution. And so consumers in Europe and in the UK were buying products that said something like 100% beef lasagna, and there was no beef in it at all. It was 100% horse meat. Pretty crazy, right? Imagine a digital and transparent food system that allowed you to know how foods were flowing from farm to table, whether it was really the product intended. Could you deter some of those fraudulent practices? Absolutely, yes. Regulatory requirements. They're getting stricter in every nation around the world. And oftentimes with those regulatory requirements are the requirements to provide records and prove through verification process. So a digital technology that allows you to do that. Food waste. This is an interesting one. Imagine for a second going into a grocery store, buying 3 bags of grocery, and as you walk out of that grocery store, you take one of those bags and throw it in the garbage can. Sounds ridiculous, right? But in essence, that's what's happening in the world today. And we know we're going to have over 9 billion people by the year 2050. It's been stated that we're going to have to produce as much food between now and then, 2050, that's been produced in all of human history. It's a pretty mind-blowing concept, isn't it? and the realization we just can't produce our way out of it. If we're wasting a third of it, let's reduce food waste. And then last but not least is transparency and this concept of trust. You saw in the video, I can tell you, I've been at retail now for 10 years. I'm not a retail expert, I'm a food expert. But what I have seen in those 10 years is without question, consumer expectations are changing. There used to be a day when people would go into the grocery store, they wanted good value, good quality products. That was good enough. But today, increasingly, consumers want to know more about their food. Where did it come from? How was it produced? Is it organic? Was it responsibly grown? And so the idea or notion that you can make information available to consumers with a digital platform not only provides the information that they want, but increases trust. And this is mainly about trust. All right, I'm going to tell you real briefly about a pilot that we did in the U.S. We've completed 2 pilots, one in China using pork, a very important animal protein in that part of the world, and one in the United States using mangoes. Some of you may have heard of the story. We're going to go real quickly through it, and then we're going to pivot and talk about some of the opportunities and challenges with technology. But it's a story worth telling. This is the life of a mango. Mango seedlings get planted in the soil. It takes them 5 to 8 years to mature and have plants that are now producing mangoes. They're generally grown in this hemisphere on very small farms, so lots of small farmers, in Central and South America. Those mangoes then, as they start to ripen, get picked by farm crews. They get shipped to what we refer to as a packing house that washes those mangoes, heat treats them so that they get rid of any pests so they can be shipped to the United States. They then get shipped by air, land, or sea into this country. Once they're in this country, they go to a food processing facility that further peels and slices them. They then get boxed in these clamshells, shipped to the Walmart distribution centers scattered across the United States, and then they get picked up and distributed and transported to our stores, about 6,000 Walmart stores and clubs across the country. Put out on refrigerated display, and we hope that customers walk by, see these beautiful, delicious-looking mangoes, and buy them. Pretty complicated journey, right? But it's pretty typical of food products today. And again, the benefits of this food system are marvelous. If we didn't have this food system and you liked mangoes, when would you eat mangoes? You probably never would. Now, if I wanted to know where those mangoes came from, what would I do? The food system today, and it's not too different than other supply chains, but the food system in particular is still very paper-based, believe it or not. Hard to believe. Lots of records. And believe it or not, by regulation, you're only required to have 1 step up and 1 step back traceability. So you can let any box up on that chart and say, hey, all I'm required to do by law is have traceability 1 step forward and traceability 1 step back. And if that's largely done on paper, how do you do it? You literally have to contact people and piecemeal it. Send me, an attachment digital image. It used to be in the days, send me a fax. But it takes a lot of time. You never can be assured of the accuracy, and that's what happened with the horse meat scandal. And a paper-based system that you have to piece together involving many layers, you can cheat. And so that's the food system. Even when there's points that are digitized, they're digitized with different systems. And so they're not connected. And so I did just that. We brought a package of those sliced mangoes into one of our meeting rooms, and I asked our team, I said, the traceback study starts right now. Literally, dropped the mangoes on the table, looked at the date and time, wrote it down. I said, go tell me, where did they come from? How long do you think it took our team to tell us the mangoes in this package from what farm or farms it came from? A week. Very good. Remember I said that it took health officials on the spinach 2 weeks to trace it back. So this man knows that Walmart's a little bit faster. Thank you. 6 days, 18 hours, and 26 minutes. And that might sound like a long time, but health officials say, hey, Walmart, you guys are really good at this. You guys do this faster than the rest. There's parts of the distribution system that we can do real rapidly, parts that are in control, but going back. So what we did with IBM, and this is an infographic that depicts the pilot that we did, is we started capturing information on the blockchain about the farm. We worked with our supplier, and they worked with their suppliers. Where did those mangoes get grown? How were they produced? Did that farm have the required food safety audit that Walmart requires? When it went to the packing house, where was the packing house? What was the date of packing? We even captured at the packing house, did it get the hot water treatment that the USDA requires here in the United States? We went on all the way through the points of the continuum, all the way to the store. captured information, ran a pilot for a period of over 30 days. We then did a test. We literally had the courage, in hindsight, we might not do this again, but we had the courage to do a demo at Walmart shareholders meeting last year. We had 23 media outlets. We brought in a package of mango, literally scanned it in front of 23 media outlets, and this is what happened. In 2.2 seconds, we knew with precision where the mangoes in that package came from. That's food traceability at the speed of thought. As fast as you could think these mangoes might be from this country, we knew it with precision and accuracy. Pretty impressive, right? Speed. Now, why is speed so important here? 7 days versus 2 seconds. On the one hand, if you hear that there might be illnesses associated with mango and you err in abundance of caution like we would do and pull all mangoes, only to find out, and this happens a lot, oops, we're not affected. What happened? 7 days of lost sales. 7 days of destroying the livelihood of small farmers. 7 days of lost consumer trust. 7 days of food waste. Not really good. On the other hand, we would never do this, but what if you decided, well, health officials are not really sure, we're just going to continue to sell it until we know. That's 7 days of potentially exposing a lot of consumers to risk. And so speed matters, not only for food safety, but for other business reasons. But here's the important point. We went beyond traceability at the speed of thought. What this proof of concept did was provide transparency at the speed of thought. Because what you can see here is not only could we tell from the 2 farms that those mangoes came from, they were the Chami variety, they were harvested on April 24th. You could see they went from the orchard to the packing house 1 day later, from the packing house to the importer a couple days later. But what you can't see here is I could have clicked on any of these boxes. The system had additional information, the food safety certifications, the hot water treatments. And I can tell you for a fellow that's been doing this for a long time, for me to get this kind of information in 2 seconds on a complicated food products journey and all of the details, it's just impossible. It literally could take weeks to get all of this information, and I had it at a fraction of a second. The other thing I had is a very clear view of how that food flows from farm to table and where are the opportunities to further optimize the food system. And while we weren't pretty good in efficient logistics systems, you can see right here, it screamed, boy, if you could speed up how that product gets across the U.S. Customs border, you just take 1 day out or 2 days out, that's 1 or 2 days you give back to the customer with shelf life and presumably fresher product and maybe less food waste in the home. And so I hope that this illustrates the power of a transparent food system. Now, doing good on time because I want to pause and allow ample opportunity for Q&A. Transparency, I said that's what we're after. What is the opposite of transparency? Opaqueness is the response we get most often. And while that's a great answer, my favorite answer is anonymity. Just not knowing where things come from. Not knowing how they flow. Not knowing did they really have their certifications. Now, is anonymity in the food system a good thing? Is anonymity in systems where you want people to behave in socially responsible manners a good thing? Banking, would you want a lot of anonymity in banking? People are saying, no, no way. Classrooms, would you want a lot of anonymity so that students can come and go as they please and there's no instructor there and there's no supervision as somebody takes an exam? Anonymity disinhibits undesired behaviors. The opposite of that is transparency, which holds people accountable. And so that's why you see transparency where you want people to behave responsibly. That's why you put, big bright lights at ATM machines and you don't put them in dark corners. And so transparency is a game changer. I think not only for food safety and food, I think this concept, and we're talking a lot about it at the dawn of the 21st century, transparency, it's a big idea. It's a big, big idea. And as we figure out to provide more transparency, I think society will just get better. So transparency is the equivalent of shining a light on the food system at every point of how that food gets from farm to table. That light, that transparency drives accountability. And as an idealistic food guy, I like to think, and then we'll move from accountability to responsibility because people will just moderate and self-govern their behaviors knowing that there's that level of accountability. Let me pause and talk about, because I was asked to really make sure I hit a few points. This is this distributed and decentralized shared food system that I talked about. And yeah, we'll be able to do tracking and tracing back from the customer all the way back to the source of the farm. But one of the questions we got was, well, how do you scale? Well, Walmart is always interested in applications of technology that scale. We're just too big. If a technology can't scale, we're not too interested in it with our size. And so it's a great question. How does it scale? One is that we're working based on standards. The GS1 standards, you're familiar with these standards that a lot of the food companies use. And so we feel that to scale, what you have to have is the enabling technology, blockchain, and based on a set of standards that is a universal language. Those two things to help the solution scale as opposed to having to solve it each time differently for different suppliers. We also believe scaling involves collaboration with others. And so as you saw in the video, we've reached out to some of these big name suppliers, Nestle, Unilever, Danone. We've even reached out to other retailers. Our CEO, Doug McMillan, the very next day after we did the demo to him, he reached out to the CEOs of companies such as Kroger's and Wegmans and said, would you participate with us? And so collaboration will let you scale because the food system is too big. And no single retailer, even one as big as Walmart, no single company, even one as big as Nestle, can do this alone. So all working together to try to digitize food allows us to scale. Another thing that we were asked is cost. Remember that slide I said, what are the business challenges we were trying to solve? Foodborne illness, recalls. Hey, a 1% reduction in foodborne illness in the United States has been estimated to save the U.S. economy $700 million. Lost wages, medical costs. Traceability. The average company that's involved with the food recall, it can be anywhere from $10 to $50 million of expenses to that company because they've been involved. Food waste. If a third of all food is going to waste, that's a lot of money going to waste, not only food, calories. And so we've taken a hard look at this. We've done numbers. And I personally am convinced that on balance, a transparent and digital system like this saves the food system money. It doesn't add cost to the food system. So I think this will drive savings and efficiencies. The other thing is, how much do suppliers pay? We're not to the point where we are ready to say, hey, this is a system working with IBM, this is what it's going to cost. But we have shared our views, and we have some pretty strong views on what this means. When we originally did the pilot, our CEO, Doug McMillan, said, we're interested in this, but the pricing on this for suppliers has to be what he referred to as no-brainer pricing. So I've never forgot that term. He said no-brainer, meaning it has to be so low. And the examples that I like to use, how many of you are on LinkedIn or on Twitter? Why did you get in? It's a complex network. We're trying to create a food network here. You got in because you got value out of it, right? You benefit. And did you have to pay? No, but some people pay. When did they start paying? When they started extracting value out of the system, right? You might have a subscription fee or a transaction fee, but they're minimal. And so if you think about how these networks have scaled in society at large in other sectors, I think it paints a pathway on how this could be done for food. And so that's the kind of concept. The other reason why we think people will collaborate, not only because everybody wants this and consumers are interested in it, it's this concept of shared value in it being democratic. Remember on that slide, we talk about these core features of blockchain. You've heard it. People always say, well, it's immutable. We get that. And we like immutability because being able to have one immutability coupled with consensus when having one shared version of the truth is good for business. But there were other features or principles that people talk about. It's democratic. And I can't tell you, you can't underemphasize the importance of that concept. Democratic in that, remember that siloed system? I said Walmart gets smarter, nobody else does. In a system like this, you get in, you own your data. There's data sharing and collaboration, so everybody gets smarter and the food system gets smarter together as opposed to individual silos getting smarter alone. And so we've talked to farmers, and so the farmers that I've talked to said, we're interested. Because when there's a food scare, all the product gets pulled only to find out that I wasn't affected. If you can clear my good name faster, I'm interested in this technology. Farmers take a lot of pride in the work that they do, and they almost never get to tell their story to the customer or the consumer. So they're real interested in that. And although we're not working on this right now, you can imagine what you can do is only limited by imagination. Could you do farmer payments? Farmers like to get paid really fast. Could you do farmer payments on a blockchain solution? We talked to the processor, the mango processor. He literally told me, he said, Frank, we're interested. Because every time we ship mangoes to stores and when they don't make shelf life, whether it's your stores, or competitor stores, or restaurants, we get blamed. In a blockchain world where you're tracking that with precision and time temperature sensors, it's no longer about fault finding. Supplier, you're at fault. It's about fact finding. What happened so that those mangoes didn't make shelf life? And so they're interested. So there's shared value. And our CEO, Doug McMillan, often talks about businesses have to create shared value. And we believe that's why this technology is different than previous attempts. Just wanted to share a little bit about the customer interface piece, really important. And so at the end of the day, we're advocates for our customer. And so it is about enabling transparency. Now, one of the things I want to make here a distinction is you will see some work, you will see some pilots being reported, and you have to really look under the hood. Because what some people are doing is putting QR codes on packages, you scan it, and you go to a website, and they say this is the country of origin, this is the farm. What we're doing with IBM is very different. We're literally building the information highway, or I use the analogy of we're pouring concrete for the nation's interstate highway system so that you can capture data as that food flows from farm to table and then decide what you make transparent to the customer based on what they want to know. That's very different than just putting a QR code on a package and taking them to a website. This is real, digitizing the food system and collecting information. It will allow you to run a smarter, more efficient, and transparent food system. We're well beyond pilot. You know, people often talk about, the pork pilot and the mango pilot, but this is where we're at today, working with IBM, 10 major brands. At Walmart alone, we've tracked over 100,000 traceability events. We've got 20 now. I think we'll quickly be even higher than that SKUs, legitimately on blockchain, not in a pilot environment, in a real production environment, real product running through our DCs and to our stores. And so with that, we want to thank you for your interest, in the technology, McCombs for forcing this larger conversation on blockchain, which that's what we need to be doing, is having larger conversations about it. And we appreciate your interest in a safer, smarter, and more efficient food system so that people can live better. Thank you very much. We've got ample time for Q&A. I wanted to intentionally pause, so please don't be shy. Or do we have a mic? Is this a small enough room I can repeat the questions? Yes, sir.
So, something that I realized earlier in the week in a different conference. You've got a consortium now of 10 major retailers and a cost of entry process. Has there been given any thought to antitrust concerns in creating a barrier of entry for smaller individuals?
Yeah, I don't envision there will be a barrier to entry. One of the things we really are adamant about, there needs to be some type of governance on how people get in. So blockchain, we've always said there's two things you're going to be solving for. One is the technological challenges and how do you overcome that. We've spent a lot of time on that. And then you've got this whole social issue of how do groups of people work together in a trusted manner. We're obviously very interested and concerned about that. Obviously, we have smart lawyers that are guiding us through that process, but the barrier to entry shouldn't be based on anything significant. You should only be prohibited from getting in if you're fraudulent, if there's reason to believe you might be a bad actor and want to do harm. Short of that, it should be pretty easy to get in. It should be low or no cost to get in. And so I don't think that's going to be an issue, but it's a good question. Yes?
Can you describe a little bit more? Can we use the mic, please?
Awesome.
We have people upstairs too, actually.
Okay. Good, small mic.
Can you describe some of the challenges that you have when you have your network and you have people in other countries or supply in other countries? What was the guiding principles to start? Do you pick, okay, this is the hardest way, we're going to build it right from the beginning, or this is the easiest way and this is what is going to get you there faster?
No, so the guiding principles, the question is, it's a really good one on what we decided. Let me begin by saying, as you heard, wasn't convinced that blockchain technology was going to be really technology. It's only, and I encourage anybody, I think people that are in this room today are probably pretty expert and veterans in the technology, to the extent that you could be a veteran because it's fairly new. But if not, I would encourage you to really study it, because that's what it took for me, was really understanding it. Once you become persuaded that it might be an enabling technology for what you're trying to do. And you can see because our food system's complex, that's why we did it. There were a couple of guiding principles. One is, where do you start? Where do you start with a proof of concept? And it's really about where can you demonstrate value? What's the business problem? And so we started off there. What are the business problems that we're trying to solve? I can't state that enough. It seems very simple, but we've seen and talked to people that are just wanting to prove the technology. But we don't want to do that. We want to prove that it's solving a business problem. And so we start off with food safety and traceability, because traceability is fundamental to all. In fact, food safety, I'm absolutely convinced that the benefits of a blockchain transparent digital food system is not food safety. There's benefits there, but it's all the other things. I refer to it as the tip of the iceberg. And once you pour that concrete and you got that information highway, then it's endless. You can add functionality on top of that. Smart contracts, shipping products back and forth, sustainability, running smarter supply chains, telling your story so that customers will become more engaged. But pick your problem. Then we landed on 2 products. Because we're a global food system, we wanted to say it can work in many parts of the world. And so we went Far East, China, and we picked pork because it's an important animal protein there to consumers. And we tested all the features that you saw us present here on traceability. We also tested some functionality and documentation to see if we could convey greater confidence in the authenticity of that product. So that's what we tried to do there. In the U.S., mangoes, because in the United States, while we want Americans to eat a lot of fresh fruits and vegetables, produce is implicated in about 50% or greater of all foodborne illnesses here in the United States because it's grown outside. And so we picked produce because it's commonly associated with these recalls. What other guiding principles? Simplicity. We tried not to, at this juncture, change business processes where we didn't need to, unless it automatically assumed it. But if you're going to go in there and try to do a proof of concept and you're starting to create work and effort, people are not going to want to participate. So, and this notion, I would say, another important guiding principle of it driving shared value. This democratizing and creating shared value, I can't overstate the importance of that. Because if it's just the big bad retailers trying to push this, or the big companies, it's not going to happen. But if the farmers say, this is going to benefit me, if the processors say, this is going to benefit me, they automatically come in. You don't have to drag them in. They're just going to be wanting to get in. So good question. Yes. Mike. And I'll make sure I look back, so not in this front row. Okay.
Thanks. Real short question, but I'm curious, as you plan this out and as you experience through your pilot, what are the unintended consequences, and maybe I have more curiosity around the negative consequences that happen? I foresee sometimes fear can spread through the internet pretty fast, and if consumers are very quickly able to see that all their produce comes from a particular region, whereas right now maybe they don't care, and that region's in the news, could that have unintended consequences? Or what else did you see?
Yeah, no, it's fair. The question was, and everybody heard it, unintended consequences. You have to be thoughtful about it and pause and say, okay, you tend to go at this with a bias of what's positive. It was interesting to me because we participated in a House and Science Committee meeting in Washington, D.C. The House did a hearing on blockchain, the application of blockchain beyond cryptocurrency. And it was interesting to me as we were questioned there by some of our politicians. They have a very different view of the world, and you can tell their first business order is to protect the nation. So lots of questions on how the technology might be misused, and I think this is where you're going, is unintended consequences. For us, some of the things that we've thought about is you're going to have a better version of the truth. People get nervous about that. I don't know if you've read this book, Good to Great by Collins. Great leaders have to face the brutal facts. And as you start becoming more transparent, you might discover things in the supply chain that you don't like. So that's an unintended consequence. You're going after it for all this good and supply chain efficiency and safer products, and then you're saying, oh my goodness, this is in the supply chain, or oh my goodness, that's the practice. And so you have to go into it eyes wide open and say, hey, we want to know the truth, because then the truth can lead to meaningful action and improvement. So I think people shouldn't be naive and go into it thinking about that. There's also this notion that people are just afraid of the disintermediation that will happen in this type of network. And everybody's a little bit nervous of that, which is okay. Now, if you know I'm producing product A for you and you know where I'm getting my ingredients from, are you just going to work around me? And so we got to work through the governance models that shows the purpose of this network is not for you to start cutting people out. I think in time there'll probably be an evolution of trying to run smarter systems, but it's not with the intent purpose of just cutting people out. But, you know, retailers should be nervous for that matter too, is what I always say to the suppliers when they're talking to me. You know, if you love brand A chocolates and you find a manufacturer, and in this digital and connected world, what prevents you from just getting online and ordering it from the manufacturer? Right? So, you know, it's good. Those are some of the big ones. And I think the last one is just data sharing in general. There's a lot of nervousness. People want it. I think we're at a new place in kind of society, and companies want to collaborate and share, and we know this is almost a requirement to move forward. But we haven't collaborated in this type of transparent manner ever before, and so we're charting new waters in this sharing. And so we've got to kind of get through how do we work and share data. The technology is going to enable it, but is human behavior going to allow it?
You know, my question is a little more technical in nature. You're saying that transparency is one of your goals or the main strategy issues that you're solving. So, but you're partnering with IBM, and I'm not saying anything against IBM or anything like that, but they are actually primarily for Hyperledger. Hyperledger is a permission ledger, so it's less transparent than permissionless ledgers. So I was kind of wondering, how do you align your corporate goal with the technology goal?
So that's a good question, because people often say, well, you know, is it an open system versus a private system, or public system versus a private system? They're companies working together to try to buy and sell food to consumers. You're going to have these permission enterprise systems that are based on a set of rules. You just can't be free willy crazy out there. And so I don't think it's a conflict at all. If you look at what's happening today versus where we want to go with the permission, you know, distributed ledger and people sharing information, let's pretend that we're in a room and there's no lights on. Where we're going is a room where there might be 10 lights and we're going to flip on 8 of them. That's a lot of transparency. I don't think we get bogged down to say, well, it's not an open source and anybody can get in. This is a lot of transparency. It's good. There's rules of governance. People will be able to see things that they weren't able to see before. And so I think it's not a step. I think it's a quantum leap in terms of transparency in the food system. And so that's why I'm okay with a permissioned enterprise blockchain system. Let's go over here. Okay.
The transparency and the democratization of this process is also dependent on how well the real world can be reflected onto the blockchain. The digitization is only as effective as, when you need to tie it to authenticity in the real world.
Yeah.
So did you have to make any changes in if you wanted to, for example, track it back to a particular tree on the farm, was there anything in terms of physical changes, devices, or processes that you had to put in place to enable this?
Oh, absolutely. I thought you were going to take that question a little bit different, but there are some changes, clearly. There's devices that maybe farmers aren't using that they're going to have to use to capture information. There are some suppliers that actually pack produce in the field, and the code that they have on those cases right now currently aren't sufficient, and so they have to change their coding so that it's compliant with the GS1 standards so we can track it. So there are some changes, but again, we're trying not to create significant process changes that change how they do their work. Generally, they've been minor tweaks, and do it in a way so that the net effect of that adds value and they don't feel like, oh, we had to go out and change a printer and invest some cost. And the net effect is everybody gains value out of the system. I thought where you're going to go was a question we often get, which is, well, even in a blockchain world, people can put fake data in. Computer people always tell me garbage in, garbage out. But I'm persuaded that even if you're taking records that you're capturing today on paper in a different system, if you're capturing it in a blockchain network, I'm persuaded that it'll deter garbage data, unless it's just accidents or mistakes. It'll deter fraudulent data. Because if you think about it, I often say, if you're going to cheat in this blockchain network that we're creating, you're not a very smart cheater. Because what we're doing is we're creating a digital footprint that leads right back to your door. The horse meat scandal, there was no digital footprint. It took investigators forever to try to go chase boxes with paper records. So that's one. And number two is more and more we'll move to a world where we capture more information automatically as opposed to people entering it. Some of the sensor data technology. We're already having conversations with some of the test kit manufacturers to say, if they test a food product, can the result of that test automatically get loaded into the blockchain as opposed to a lab analyst writing the results? Good. Other questions? Who's got the mic? Somebody's got the mic. Okay.
Thanks. So my question is, why does this need to be a distributed or decentralized ledger as opposed to just a more robust centralized digital ledger that tracks this whole thing through the supply chain?
It's a good question, and I've got that. You know, when I first did this demo, I did a demo like this to Fonterra. They're one of the world's largest dairy producers based in New Zealand. And the very smart fellow at Fonterra said, you know, I do the 2.2 seconds, food traceability at the speed of thought, and expect people to say, wow, that's impressive. He said, with the New Zealand accent, so what, mate? You know, it's like, why do I need blockchain to do that? And my response was, you don't. Not to do mangoes in 2.2 seconds, but try to do this with 75,000 food SKUs, with 10 major national retailers, with thousands of farmers. You're not going to do that in one of these siloed networks. You're not going to get everybody to come in and participate. And so this blockchain protocol drives collaboration. It's solving the many-to-many. It's solving, we believe, the issues of people working together. So it's not as simple as just, if it could have been done with the previous systems, it would have been done. And so we think blockchain truly digitizes information, the protocols, and these concepts that people often talked about, consensus and trust and democratic, are true principles that are going to drive value in the ecosystem. It's really forming an ecosystem for people to get into. So, good question. One more question.
How is the adoption of the deployment model? Like, we're expecting people in China and a farm to adopt a technology where they can scan what is happening there, where technology doesn't exist. How is the chain able to get their data in a reliable and a system? Like, we are expecting some kind of a scanner and unmutilated form of data ingest into the system. So how is this technology evolving?
I'm not sure I heard all of it, but I think I heard China and, you know, how do you get farmers, I think, in China, and, you know.
Scan at a farm, where the farm doesn't have wireless connection, data connectivity.
Well, the one thing we've realized is the food system is pretty diverse, and what we're trying to do is there's no single way. There may be my preferred routes to get in and to put data in, but no single way. But it could be as simple as a farmer having a smart device. And today these smart devices are proliferating all over, and you'll be surprised, you know, some of you know, I've been in countries where I see somebody on a camel with a smart device. It's like, wow, okay. They have their smart device. Put the information in about harvest date, where I harvested it from, and so you can capture information that way. Others will be a little bit more sophisticated, and they'll have packages or clamshells on the farm, and they'll scan, and data will be captured via scan. So there's no single way to get in, but this idea 10 years ago would have been dead, but with the proliferation of smart devices, connectivity, et cetera, it's an idea that you see has merit and that can scale, but 10, 20 years ago, it would have been dead on arrival. I think we're out of time, but listen, thank you very much. I'll be around. Questions at the break. Thank you.